For those of you who watch and listen to this podcast, you'll know I'm not a huge fan of assessments, but today we have someone who is willing to step into the lion's den and have a conversation about how to properly and improperly use assessments. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to episode 46 of the KeyHire Small Business Podcast, where we cover issues that help owners scale their small business. I'm Corey Harlock, creator of KeyHire, and I'll be your host. Our guest today is Brian Gelt, and he is the founder and CEO of Peoplytix, that's a mouthful, where he is a predictive index certified partner, and he helps business owners hire, develop, and retain talent. A couple interesting points about Brian. He's a 35-year veteran of retail automotive, used to work at the #1 Audi dealership in North America, which is pretty cool. He's got 3 adult boys. They cover the gamut of all professions. They're in advertising, they're in real estate, and then they're in finance. And he's a pretty good golfer. He gave me a bit of a humble brag. You know, he said, I don't know if I'm a good golfer. I said, what's your best score? And he said, 83. I'd take an 83 any day. So let's welcome Brian to the show.
Thanks
Brian,
for having me.
Hey, man, my pleasure. So we're going to be talking about assessments today. Yes. Give us a little kind of 30,000 foot overview of how you got into doing the predictive index.
Yeah, actually, when I was in the automotive business, I was a client of the predictive index, and it was an absolute game changer for me. My whole career, being in the automotive business, it's really all about developing people. It's about building your teams, hiring the right people, and developing them and keeping them. And I had looked for so many tools. I had found things that did parts of it. When I came across predictive index, it was the game changer. It had all of the pieces that I needed in order to be able to hire the right people, grow them, develop them. And so when I retired from automotive retail, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do for a quote unquote second chapter. And I thought, I love doing this. I believe in this tool, not just as a software, but as a way to help businesses develop their people. And so I decided to make it my second chapter. I had some really good people around me who helped me make that transition pretty easy. And now I've got about 60 clients across the country, from anything from companies with 20 people to companies with 30,000.
Awesome. All right. So let's get into this. So when we talk about, and thanks for the background, sure. When we talk about using assessments, people call them all kinds of different things, right? We call them assessments. We can call them tests. I always get worried when people say, give them the test. And it's like, that immediately becomes we know how they're going to use this thing, right? The results of it. But walk through in your world, and not just specifically with predictive index, but in the world of assessments, how would we define them? What is the purpose of them? Kind of give us the overview of, if we're thinking about assessments, what are they?
Yeah. So an assessment is really a way to get a snapshot of somebody you don't know, right? If you think about your work environment, if I spend 6 months, 8 months, a year with somebody, I kind of know them, right? I know their buttons. I know their hot points. I know what's going to work. I know what's not going to work, right? But when you're hiring somebody, you kind of need to know that up front, right? I need to know who am I actually hiring? What do they like to do? How are they going to fit into my business, into my culture? Are they going to like the job, right? And so we use these assessments as the ability to understand people in a way that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do for a long period of time.
And are they, I know the answer, but I'll ask the question, right? So different, do all the assessments we hear about out there, because there seems to be a lot of them, do they all measure the same thing?
They don't all measure the same thing. There are some that are more situational, right? Where they try and put you into a scenario and you're supposed to tell them how to figure it out and all of that stuff. And there's assessments like that, and they have a place and they have some value. the predictive index is a behavioral assessment, and really what it's designed to do, it's a free choice survey, takes about 5 or 6 minutes. And really what it does is we just get a snapshot, a picture of an individual and how they like to work. So if I can simplify it, right? You know that you have some people that are super outgoing, right? You can see, and then you've got other people who aren't. Well, what we find is when somebody interviews, they can absolutely fake it, right? They can fake it for a couple of interviews. I mean, you know this better than I do.
Yeah, anyone can fake it for an hour, right?
Anyone can fake it for an hour, and even statistically, they fake it for about 3 months. And then what happens is they don't want to fake it anymore.
Right.
And so, I hire someone who's maybe a little more introverted, right? And I hire them to be in sales because they were awesome in the interview. Well, then somewhere around 3 months, they start going, yeah, I don't really want to talk to that person. I don't really want to talk to that guy.
I'm exhausted.
And so, okay, now I've hired a salesperson who doesn't like to talk to people. That's a problem.
That's a huge problem. Yeah, right.
Right. And so what we see statistically, and I see this with a lot of my clients, is what I call churn, but that turnover in that first 6 months.
Right.
That's people who kind of fake their way through the interview, right?
Yeah. Well,
and then a little bit further down the road, they're not interested.
Yeah. And the statistics around hiring, as we call it, the DIY hiring, it's about 1 in 3. You get it right 1 in 3 times. So if you have a vacant position, the odds are you'll have to hire 3 people to get someone with a level of competence in that role. Now, I'm not saying they last 6 weeks and they're gone. It could be the 6-month person. I mean, and if it takes you on average 6 months to realize it's not the right person, and it's taking you a few months to fill the gap each time, you could go 18 months where that position is not even neutral, but could be hurting your business because you have an expectation of a performance and you're paying someone to not do the job you expect of them, right? And that's more damaging, especially in sales, because clients aren't being followed up with. How many clients are just switching, talking with their feet and moving to the competition because the service isn't what it used to be, whatever it is. And so, like you said, that churn, that turnover is the silent killer.
And it's not that silent. If you look at your bottom line,
you're right. Yeah.
Right. There's a number of surveys out there that say it's about 30, they vary between 30 and 50% of an annual salary is what it costs to replace an employee.
Yeah, that's a low ball depending on how high up you go. Like that's for an associate level person. But if you're in a manager or someone like a niche, that key piece of experience, it can be 2x that person's annual salary.
You're exactly right. So imagine you're $100,000 person, right? And even if it only costs you half, it costs you $50,000, right? If you lose one person per month, that's $600,000 to your bottom line.
Yeah, or even if to use the other example, if you have to hire 3 times to replace that one position, it costs you $150K to replace a $100,000 position just like that. But then there's all the costs that don't correlate. So say it was an operations manager and they're not good and your quality goes down, so you're trashing more items. Your OTDs go down, so now you have more upset people and maybe you're discounting. Your safety goes down, so maybe someone gets dinged by a forklift and they're out and your workman's comp goes up. These are all costs that aren't associated with hiring, but they are absolutely associated with hiring.
Thank you for making my point.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let's get into this. I kind of, I've worked with some people that, in my opinion, used assessments the wrong way, which is an absolute no-go, right? Here's the dot on the chart. Here's the personality profile we have to have or we don't hire. And my theory is they've had someone say, well, this is the type of manager you are, quote unquote, bad manager, right? You're a bad manager. So if we can find people with these personality types or their dot hits the graph in a certain part, they won't be as affected by your poor management. Therefore, they should work better in your company. So now we're really on the hunt for these specific people that will tolerate bad management, whatever that is. Define it however you want.
You're exactly right. And that's, that is one of the ways that is the wrong way to use the assessments, right? But it does get used that way. Now, I will tell you, if you're at an executive level, right? If we're at a C-suite level and I need to hire a new CFO, or I need to hire a new this person or that person, right? At that C-suite, sometimes there's a lot of value in how are we going to get along, right? How is that new person going to fit into our environment? Because if I have an environment, and I have a former client this way, that their environment is every day is on fire, right? Yeah. And they wanted to hire a CFO who was really steady to keep the shop stable, right? Well, that was probably a really good idea, except
in theory.
In theory, right? But every time he said, well, let me look at it and I'll get back to you tomorrow, they freaked out and finally let him go, right?
Because they didn't have any urgency.
Right. Everything had to be done yesterday. So there's some value in knowing who you got, especially at that kind of level. And, sometimes we look at team building and team design and doing all of that stuff. And it's really valuable. If what we're trying to do is I need to hire really assertive people because the manager in that department is such an A-type, right? That he's running off everybody. Well, okay. Now I'm hiring people to suit a bad manager when really what I need to do is fix that manager.
Yeah. And because we know if you hire people that aren't as affected by your bad management, they're just unaffected for longer than other people, but there's still people that won't tolerate, right? And the other side of that is every environment is right for someone. And some companies are that hard charging, we're competitive, we put everything on the wall, we rank everyone every week. And if you're in the bottom third, we're going to, and some people that, I'm not saying that's a bad environment. What I'm saying is you got to find people that thrive in that environment. Not everyone will, but there are people that would look at that and go, yeah, baby, bring it on. Maybe they're a former competitive athlete or something. They're like, I love being measured up against other people. That motivates me. Maybe it's an environment where it is slow moving and it's core, maybe it's a family business and it takes a long time to get decisions made and they're worried about hurting people's feelings. That's not a wrong environment either, but finding the people that are able to function and thrive in that environment is the key to scaling and growing and success of your business, right?
You're exactly right. And assessments can have a lot of value there because we know how people are going to fit in. We can see, we can identify, and we can actually use Predictive Index as some tools that are designed all for exactly that. Let me look at a team together. Let me see how they're all going to fit. And let me see, it even goes further. Let me see how that team will align to my priorities.
Right. Okay. And then, so we're talking about mistakes, and I think you just kind of touched on one, and I'll get you started. Maybe you'll say I'm right, maybe you'll say I'm wrong, but I think one of the mistakes companies might make is they decide to use an assessment, but they don't baseline the company.
Correct. Yeah, and with Predictive Index, we sometimes there's a baseline to the company. Certainly, there's a baseline, from management, senior management. But one of the things we do that's unique is we look at the behavioral demands of a job, of a role, right? So when earlier we were talking about, maybe you have somebody introverted or maybe you have somebody extroverted, really, there's no good or bad. There's no right or wrong. The wrong thing is if I take somebody who I know is introverted and I put them in an extroverted job, well, it's just a matter of time before they're unhappy, right? And so I wonder why I can't retain people. Well, every day they get up, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to go to work again, right? If I put the right person in the right job, every day they wake up, they're energized. They're like, I love this. I can't wait to get there.
That's that old, right seat, right? Whoever's on the bus, right seat. You got to get them in the right seat. Doesn't mean they're bad employees. It means we might have miscast them or put them in the wrong spot.
Right. And the thing that I work with my clients to do is to identify what are the demands. And we've got a process and a tool that we use to do that. It makes it pretty simple. So we can even help, sometimes we have an employee who's a great cultural fit, right? They're good, they're honest, they're hardworking, they're everything we want them to be, and they're just mediocre in the job. It gives us an opportunity to find the right job, right? Because if I can take that great person and I put them in something that naturally suits them, wow, they tend to thrive.
Yeah.
And that's a win for everybody.
And that reminds me of that 4-box, right? You have the wrong fit, right, or right fit, wrong fit or right fit, experience, inexperienced, experience. Always take culture over experience. Simon Sinek's one of my favorite lines is the high performing asshole, right? That is one of the most destructive things to a company. A, they ruin your culture, but B, they hold you hostage and make it really hard for you to get rid of them.
Yeah.
What other mistakes can you think of?
Well, I'll tell you one of the mistakes that I think clients make, and you started to mention it, when they look at a go, no go, right? And anytime you're using an assessment, we will rank people. We'll tell good fit, great fit, 5 stars, 4 stars. I mean, I have some clients that'll say anything below 4 stars, I don't even want to talk to them. Well, that's a mistake, right?
Yeah.
Really, what an assessment should be doing is helping you expand the talent pool, not shrink it. And so when it's used properly, first of all, I have the ability to find people who have a strong natural fit for the job I need done, but may not have the resume for it, right? So it helps me to identify people. We used to say, hire for attitude, train for skill, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of a version of that. It's hire for people that are a good fit. Yeah. Hire people that are naturally inclined. I'll teach them the rest. I made a whole business out of that.
Right. And I might add a caveat to that. Yeah, I think that would apply to entry level, associate level people. But if you're hiring a manager to run a department, you're going to probably want to make sure they have that experience. And now it's narrowing in terms of who we would look at seriously, right? Not based on their assessment results, but we're going to want some experience in there too if you're going to be a leader or leading a department, something like that.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's important to note that what any assessment should not be your only data point. It should be one of your data points, right? We want to look at resume. We still want to interview. I'm not hiring someone who's a liar and a thief because their assessment results look good, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that would be a mistake. And by the way, that happens. So, we want to make sure we're adding in that data point, and it's a data point that we can't really find any other way than an assessment.
Right. Okay. Where in the process of hiring do you find the assessment is best utilized?
I like it right at the beginning. Now, of course, it depends on the type of person that type of role that I'm hiring for.
Right.
If it's an associate level, I want everyone to get the assessment, because I want to find the people with no resume, right? I want to find those people that are a natural fit that may not have the resume. So I want to be clear, you're doing it first. When you look at that assessment, are you looking at the resume and the assessment, or are you trying to look at the assessment unbiased with as little information, just to see is this a person that's going to fit us culturally? Yeah, I'm going to look at both, because I want those data points.
Okay.
I personally, I always like to look at the assessment results first, because it helped inform some of the resume. And what I mean by that is, if I have somebody applying for sales that their assessment results say they don't really belong in sales, and then I look at their resume and I see that they've had a series of short-term jobs in sales, I know I've confirmed my suspicions, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, but I like both data points, because listen, there are those anomalies. And if I find somebody who maybe isn't quote unquote perfect for sales, but that somehow they've managed and they've got a 10-year track record, I want to talk to that person.
Yeah. Yeah. And then another thing, have you ever experienced this? I think we've experienced this in the past. People gaming an assessment. Like, I don't know if they're Googling the answers, but we had someone on a disc one time years ago, And the person who deciphered those assessments on disc, his words were, "I don't think I've ever seen a better assessment in my life." Then the person came in and just was not the person that the assessment said they were at all, right? And we had put them through lots of interviews, and like you said, I don't know if we were gamed or something dramatic changed in their life, which then changed their drive and ability to perform their job. Whether it, personal shit happens, right? I don't know if they were going through a divorce. I don't know if they had an addiction that kind of reared their ugly head. I don't know what the story was, but the person who showed up to work was not the person that we had interviewed and who had completed that assessment.
And it could happen, right? The interesting thing about predictive index in particular is because it's a free choice survey, when you take the assessment, it's literally just words on a page. So you're just checking words that you think, sound like you, or that other people think sound like you. And so there's no, it's really tough to game.
Right.
But I'm not saying it's not possible. Sure, anything's possible. Yeah. But how much time are you going to spend trying to game that assessment?
Especially for like a 7-minute deal, but some of these other assessments take 45 minutes, right? And so you're like, you're in deep on some of those, which is, I would throw it in as another mistake is overusing, hey, we'll do this one and this one and this one and this one. And a lot of times I talk to my clients a lot about, there's this misconception that when people have a job and you're putting them in their interview process, we can take our time because they have a job. And so we'll just throw all this stuff at them and they'll do it when they have a minute. And that's actually untrue. The people who have a job are very quick to say, this is a hassle, man. I already got a job. I'm out. Right. So I've had people, we say, hey, we just need you to do this one survey. And I'm not doing a survey. Thanks. Yeah. Right. You know who will fill out all those? People who are unemployed and need a job. Right? And so they'll hang in the process as long as they need to until someone says, yes, here's an offer. And put these, I consider them hurdles or barriers to entry sometime, and putting up one and saying, hey, I know it's a bit of a pain in the ass. It's going to take you, maybe some of these more intense ones. It's 45 minutes. I know it's a huge pain in the ass. Like, pour yourself a glass of wine, put on some good music, lock yourself in your office, tell your kids not to bug you, and just bang it out. And most people laugh and go, yeah, we'll get it done for you. But if I say, okay, we got this one, when you're done that one, we're going to send you another one, you can audibly hear them go, ugh. And yeah. They might do the first one. You're like, hey, are you going to do that second one? They're like, you know what? I'm busy. So have you seen them used? I better make this into a question, right? But have you seen companies that overuse stacking these assessments? And what is your impression, or what is your experience, and how that impacts the application process?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of quick, just because I think that provides companies with a competitive advantage, is to be able to hire and make those decisions quickly. Frankly, I think it also sets the tone for that employee going forward, right? If this is a company that makes decisions and acts quickly, sometimes they want to be involved with that. And if it's a company that takes 9 months to make a decision, they don't want to be involved with that. So I certainly, there can be too much, and that process needs to be as easy and simplified and streamlined as possible.
Great.
Again, depending on the type of role. And if I'm looking at a leadership position, I'm probably having conversations before I'm sending assessments, right? It's going to sound something more like, hey, I'm interested in talking with you more. I'm going to send you this assessment. It'll take you less than 10 minutes. Great. Let's go ahead and fill that out, and then we'll schedule you for an interview. It's going to sound more like that. If it's a position, like you said, an associate position, and I've got 400 applicants for 40 openings, I prefer to send the assessment first blind, because that's my first weeding out process, right? Yep. If they're not willing to spend 10 minutes, I'm kind of done.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm in alignment with you mostly on that as well. It can be, I think it can be used as a weeding out tool just to see who's committed to do it. But in my experience, I've had a lot of businesses that use it as a weeding out tool for people they really want. And it kind of counteracts it. It doesn't accomplish what they think it's going to accomplish. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I found most valuable about predictive index in particular, but any assessment, is, there's no perfect people, right? It's very rare that you find somebody that ticks every box and that is perfect, quote unquote, perfect for the job, right? Yep. Usually you're going to find somebody who hits some of the big stuff, but maybe there's some other things that maybe aren't perfect, right? Yeah. So what that enables me to do is hire that person knowing what I need to keep an eye on, right? For example, if I want to hire somebody who, maybe they're a little less detailed than I would like, well, I know I need to keep an eye on the details until I get them fully up to speed. Yeah. Because otherwise what happens is 6 months down the road, you're like, why are my billings all out of whack? And you open a drawer and there's 6 months worth of work in there that's never been billed. And you're like, oh my God, right? Yeah. But if I know who I'm dealing with in advance, it enables me to hire somebody with tremendous strengths and know exactly which weaknesses I need to keep an eye on.
Very cool. And I think that's a great segue into the advice. So if there's a business owner out there, or business owners, and they're thinking, I've been toying with this idea of assessments, but I'm not sure, cost prohibitive is off. I always say the small business owners, their two biggest excuses are don't have the time, cost too much, right? Yeah. Those are what we talk about. So if you had, what are your top 3 to 5 pieces of advice you would give a small business owner, just in general, around assessments, if they're currently using them or they're thinking about using them, how they can make them more effective and impactful for their business?
Yeah, the first thing I would do is I would tell you, use them consistently. If you're not going to use them, don't use them. But if you're going to use them, it's not hit and miss, right? Use them with everybody. Use them with each position. Understand what you're looking for, right? Because when we look at personalities and behaviors, there's no right or wrong, right? It only matters in relation to the work or other people. So you have to have an understanding of what you're looking for and who you are, right? I can't hire a number 2 for me if I don't know who I am. So there's a lot of value there. So I like sending it out to everybody. I will tell you, I built my business on finding people who had no resume. They were behaviorally correct for the job, and I helped them. I coached them and built them and developed them into really successful, profitable careers, and profitable for us as well. The other piece of advice I would give, if you're going to use an assessment, it's the extra data point. It's the missing data point. You are still going to do resumes. You're going to look at those. You're still going to, look at experience. You are still going to look at education. You're still going to look at, you're going to make reference calls and make sure you know exactly who you're dealing with. You don't just throw all of that out, right? What we're trying to do is give you that piece that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Right. And I think an effective way I've heard it described is it's one leg of a 3-legged stool. You got to do your assessment. You got to do your interviews. You have to do your whatever. If you do references, it's a part of what you do, and knowing where to do it. And I just want to go back. We talked about when to use it, but I want to clarify for me, and you'll tell me if you disagree. A lot of people will go through the interview process, and then as a final step, they will give an assessment. Right. And what has happened in my experience is the assessment wasn't great, but we really like them and we'll think they're doing a good job because they've already become so biased. Right. They've already decided that they're going to hire this person regardless of the result. So at that point, the assessment becomes unneeded. Right?
Useless.
And so I think what you were saying, by putting it closer to the beginning, and that's how we do it as well, is we always do it at the beginning. I'll give the assessment before my clients ever even know who the person is, because I want them to see that assessment with zero bias. I don't want them to say, oh, they got the exact experience we want. We can get over the fact that they're going to be impossible to work with, right? Or whatever that is. So that's one of the mistakes. It's a point of clarification because I think we talked about it, but I wanted to add that kind of opposing piece of information to kind of understand why you put it at the front, because then you're truly unbiased.
I love that. And I'm glad you did, because we do have a tendency to do that. You know, we also do the same thing with jobs, right? If I understand exactly what the demands of my job are behaviorally, okay, then I know who's going to be a good fit and who's not. If I don't do that, I just meet somebody, I interview somebody, I really like this person, right? They are absolutely wrong for the job, but I really like them. So we're gonna make it work, right? And I'll do those parts of the job that they don't like. Well, why am I hiring somebody if I'm gonna do the work, right?
It's like all the halo and the like me bias, all those crazy things just kicking in fully, right? And that's why
exactly
that
right.
Being as unbiased as you can when you kind of use that information, I think, is really, really important.
The other reason I like doing it towards the front is Predictive Index in particular has some brilliant interview tools that are behavioral based interview questions. So, I mean, I know you're a professional interviewer, right? So you're really good at it, but truth is most managers aren't, right? Most hiring managers aren't.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right. And so this gives them more, this gives them the tools, this gives them questions, behavioral based questions that will help improve the interview process for them.
Yeah. And I've seen some of those at work, and you're right. It's funny because you can tell when they're reading them because they're they're worded, they read them, so they're not conversational, but you know, it's a good jumping off point, and it always spurs good conversation. So I'll give you that too. A couple other things I've seen the benefits of them are I've seen companies where they post their results either on their door or on their desk. So when people walk in to talk to them, they get this kind of signal that, oh, I'm going in to speak with someone who prefers this type of communication and this type of interaction. So it gives you a reset before you walk in the door. And it's kind of funny because people will, well, they take that information, they actually action it versus putting it in a binder where you never see it again.
Yeah. And I know we weren't, you know, we've been focused on talking about the hiring process for obvious reasons, but there are tremendous tools that are all about coaching and development and interpersonal relationships that help us get more out of each other, right? And understand who we're working with. And exactly like what you just said, right? If I know who I'm dealing with, it's easier for me to go in there, you know, because otherwise my default is me. And, you know, I go in with a head of steam, and not everybody is as receptive as I would like.
Yeah. If you're anything like me, I'm very direct and to the point. You either like it or you don't. And it's the majority of people don't, they have a hard time taking it, right? I have to say, oh, I'm just asking, I'm just curious, but this is just kind of how train gets rolling, you know, and I start digging in. And I have another one of my favorite business owners. He doesn't have an office at his business anymore, but when he used to, he had a sign on his door that said, I'm impulsive, I have a lot of ideas, and I have a short attention span. Come on in and let's talk, you know, like just kind of totally disarming, but it's exactly, and I don't know if those are the right 3 points, but they're probably pretty close, but that's who he was, right? And he's just, when you come in here, it's going to be short, it's going to be fast, it's going to be furious.
Yeah, but that's brilliant, right? That's kind of the idea of part of what we do with Predictive Index when we in the post-hire, you know, stuff that we do is, who am I talking to? Who am I about to be talking to? Because if I go in to try to talk to that person and I bring him 57 pages of stuff, right? There's no way he looks at it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, man, this has been great. Brian, thanks so much for stepping into the lines then today and taking this on. You did a great job. I do know people that use them effectively. And I think a point of distinction that you made me aware of is maybe I'm challenged with assessments because, as you said, I become the assessment. When I dig into our process, and we have a pretty in-depth, I like to say it's exhaustive and efficient, and those two can coexist in the same world. But, if you don't have someone with a level of expertise like you or me kind of as your middleman or acting on behalf of you, that's where these are assessments like the predictive index is a good idea, something to explore. And having said that, if someone did want to explore and learn more about you and what you do, how can we get in touch with you?
They can find me on my website. They can find me on my LinkedIn page.
Peoplytix, we pronounce your website Peoplytix. It took me a minute to wrap my mouth around that. Right.
Peoplytix, people and analytics. Peoplytix.
Okay. Got it.
And in fact, for any of your listeners, I'm happy to give them a free trial if they wanted to test it out. And we'll give you a link for that so that they can reach out.
In the liner notes, we'll drop it down there. Yeah.
Yep.
And did you say, what was the other one, Matt? What's the other contact we have for? There you go, LinkedIn. All right. And people can reach out to you through LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And I'd be happy.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation. I know when we first kind of did our pre-show introduction to each other, we knew we weren't in total alignment, but you did a great job, and it was really good information. And I think there is a right place for assessments, in particular predictive index. I know people that have used it with a good deal of success.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I'm glad we weren't in alignment. It made it a little more fun.
It did. Just kind of makes the conversation a little more interesting, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Bye.
There you go, Brian Gelt from the Predictive Index Certified Partner. Check him out. Take him up on the free trial. Can't hurt, right? And he's a wealth of information. So if it's something you're serious about, he'll be able to walk you through it. Some good information there. I'd like to thank you for tuning into the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. If you got value out of today's episode and you want to keep up to date on our new content, make sure you leave a comment. Let us know any topics you'd like us to discuss, and let us know what you thought of the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. We'd love to have you be on the list. If you prefer to listen to your podcast, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite platform by searching KeyHire Small Business Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Corey Harlock, and until next time, stop grinding, start growing.